Hmm, Why is this not? Oh. Hi, this is Marlene with Miami Ghost Chronicles, and I want to welcome you to another episode of Stories of the Supernatural. Wherever you find us, whether it's a video or podcast on your favorite platform, please like and subscribe to us so that you can get notification of when a new show is released. You can also find us on major social media platforms. If you go to miamighostchronicles.com, you can find links to the videos or MP3 files, which you can download and enjoy without commercial interruptions. If you're into classic horror, ghost, and adventure stories, I narrate Nightshade Diary, and you can find links at nightshadediary.com. If scary stories are your bag, and listening to encounters with cryptids, ghosts, dogmen, and other weird creatures sends a shiver up your spine, then go to supernaturalstorytime.com for links to our weekly podcasts. Noteworthy news about the paranormal world, true crime, conspiracy stories, and anything that is just plain weird can be found at eerie.news or visit the Stranger Than Fiction Stories tab at miamighostchronicles.com. Please subscribe to my newsletter on Substack. Just go to mppellicer.com for a link. I want to thank you for being part of my audience, and I think you are all wonderful. So, how's everybody doing? Good, I hope? Okay, I'm not going to do the weather report this week. I'm going to go into something change in time, daylight savings time, which, by the way, I'm sure everybody's heard. As a matter of fact, they've been talking about it for a couple of years that they're going to do away with the daylight savings time, but that's beside the point. You don't realize how much you pay attention to that until you walk around and you're like, wait a minute, it's what time is it? Because now, of course, it gets darker later. So I've spent like this week well, maybe basically 5 days doing that. I've got to watch and everything, but I'm telling you, there's a lot of cues that we take from our surrounding, including daylight, sun, and I've been like, all of a sudden it's like, whoa, wait a minute, you know, thinking it's daylight, it's actually later, that kind of crap, that kind of thing, or like, I'll get up and it's like, man, it's dark outside. What happened? It's like, wait. So yeah, that's one of those things, if we can get into it, it's part of your circadian rhythm and things like that. But yeah, that's my like the misstep, like no, no, I'm not gonna go outside. But wait a minute, it's already 7 and it's still dark and that kind of stuff. But yeah, it kind of like it's a crazy kind of thing. How much, because everybody thinks that we pay attention only to this, as in the phone. But believe it or not, there's a lot of stuff that we take in from our surroundings that, and as a matter of fact, if you hear all this crazy noise in the background, that's my exotic birds, which I still haven't taken out into the screen porch. That because it's still even though it's the evening, we still have daylight. They're carrying on this great conversation, and hopefully it won't come out. But if it is, that's them. That's them. Because as far as they're concerned, it's you know, they're chattering up a storm. But there we go. But outside of that, everything has been pretty calm, which is good. Like I always say before, dull sometimes is good. You know, dull is good. I'm going to repeat my Louis L'Amour quote, which is adventure is a romantic name for trouble. All right. And I know it depends, but yeah, there's times where I could take like, you know what, not doing anything, nothing, but things like that. It's like, man, nothing's happening. That's a good thing. And then you get bored and you move on to other things. But yeah, people ask me how's things with I do that search and rescue work. Luckily, we haven't had anything out here as far as imminent stuff, so we're working more on how can I say, sometimes searching for cold cases, if you want to, people that have not been recovered, that have disappeared in this area of where I'm at in central North Florida. And let's face it, law enforcement will only look for so long, even if they suspect there's foul play involved. So this is where sometimes groups like ours steps in and we keep on looking, and we've got, and let's say for example out here there's a lot of acreage of forest land where you can't go in there with a vehicle. So we have horse units and also dogs, of course. But yeah, it's very, very interesting. So if you do have some type of family member or anything like that that falls into that category where you know, maybe foul play is suspected, but they've never found the person, shoot me an email, okay? And I'll take it over to the person that organizes everything, and maybe they can do something with it because sometimes, things are, people are found one way or the other. It's just with a little bit more effort, more time. So there we go. But let's get on to the good part. The good part is who is the guest today. His the first time he's here on Stories of the Supernatural. His name is Diego the Podcaster. He's a former sports entertainer and now the host of Let's Find Out with Diego and Bonus Overdrive Wednesday. He transited into paranormal organically with otherworldly experiences, which we'll be asking him about, shaping his perspective from a very young age and persisting throughout his entire life. Late in 2022, he boldly launched his own brand, Let's Find Out with Diego. This venture isn't just a podcast, it's a quest to find answers to the profound mysteries of the universe and a deep dive into the haunting activities woven through the fabric of his existence, with otherworldly experience shaping his perspective from an early age and persisting throughout his life. Let's find out why Diego was predetermined by the universe to have a voice. All right, help me welcome him. How are you doing today, Diego?
I'm doing
There,
great. Yeah, there we go. I did it again. I'm doing
for a
great.
minute there, I
Thank
was
you.
like, no, I know. I do that sometimes because it's like, like I said, sometimes you want to sneeze, cough, or just you're saying something and it's like, I don't want this to be. So I have to ask, what are those early experiences that eventually led you into this field?
My goodness, it's one of those things that later in life you start really recollecting these stories. And
Mm-hmm.
when I was a kid, you don't really think in the
Yes.
paranormal terms. At least when I was, because this started when I was 2 or 3 years old.
Okay.
Back when I lived in Puerto Rico, and before I moved here in 1980 in DC area. And it's one of those things to where you really didn't talk about it as much,
Mm-hmm.
but you knew what's going on. And at that age, and I can only speak for myself, I'm sure there's a lot smarter kids than I am that, like I said, you don't really think paranormal or supernatural. You think it's just part of your life.
Right.
Yeah. And with that is it was interesting about the whole thing is that most of these things only really happen on my mother's side of the family, not on my dad's side of the family. So, and also, and I don't want to sound sexist. I don't mean to be sound sexist. I really
Go right
don't.
ahead. I don't care.
But
Go
but
ahead.
it was only talking about my mother's side of the family, but it was
Uh-huh.
only the women that had the
Mm-hmm.
abilities or were able
Right.
to have these types of experiences. As far as I know, and pretty much 100% think I'm right. I'm the only guy on my mother's side of the family who's had any kind of experiences. I have zero abilities. I don't have anything like that, but throughout my life, and it's not every day or every week, but
Mm-hmm.
since I was three up until even now, the half century mark, things have been happening. And even more now as an adult, especially in the house I moved in here in West Virginia. But it's very interesting. And then one day I got this crazy idea to write a book. I've never written a book.
Okay.
I was a terrible student in high school, and English and writing was my worst subject, which should be my best subject, right?
And
But I
grammar
said,
grammar is boring, let's face it. But anyway, go ahead.
yeah, grammar's terrible. Autocorrect saved my life and my wife. She kind of looked through everything because
Uh-huh.
without her, none of this would be possible. Let me put that out there. And so well, I'm sorry. I get on a tangent. So
No, 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 no. Keep going.
I decided to write the book. It's a short book because I would just wanted to put my experiences and what happened,
Mm-hmm.
and not. And a friend of mine says I didn't put a lot of fluff in this book. I put out here's what happened, here's when it happened, and I give a little general description of the time period when it happened.
Okay.
So with the '70s was a great decade. I was born in the mid '70s. I'm an '80s baby. You
Mm-hmm.
know, the long hair heavy metal guy, and then still am, but no long hair, mostly bald now. And so during that time, what I remember is, and I'll go with the first story in the book, not to give too much away,
Mm-hmm.
but it was right about late '70s. So I can remember that those nights, but one particular night, and I don't know if much people know about, and you might know about this,
Go ahead.
Three Kings Day, right?
Of
Is in
course, Dia de los Reyes, which is
yes,
Epiphany, 7th of January. Yes.
And during that time, I only remember because it's a really big thing in the island. It's
Mm-hmm.
almost like having second Christmas, but you only get one gift.
Yes, exactly. Right, right,
And if you want to be, you don't want to be greedy, you get one. I mean, they only have time to give
right.
one gift. So, and then you go out there, and we live in these apartments, and there was a field in the back, and you got to
Okay.
go out there and collect grass or hay if you can find it, put it in a shoebox, and
Mm-hmm.
you would either put
Okay.
it under your bed or around the house somewhere. So one night, one of several nights, but one particular night, it was lights out, and like I said, the book is called "I Remember the Crib," specifically because I remember seeing these figures through the bars of the crib, and
Okay.
I don't know how they make cribs now, but back then they were pretty big, and it was about the size of I want to say a single, but half of it. And I was a little kid, and the bars for me were might as well have been 13 feet high, and the walls,
Right.
And then one night, I used to sneak out a lot, climb over there like a little kid, thinking I was getting away with a lot of things, and you really don't. Mom knows everything.
Of course.
The sandal's not too far away. She has great aim,
Yeah.
and I remember this one particular night because it was so interesting. Not as much terrifying because I didn't feel fear, but it was more like I don't know how to explain that feeling. But when I was looking out in the hallway late at night, and I never slept with the door shut. That wasn't really my thing.
Okay.
There's no AC, so you gotta let the
Right.
air in the whole
Sure.
house. And I started hearing the sounds of what would have been like a large crowd. And there's no large crowds. There's no parties going on. I
Right.
lived on the 10th floor condominium, and it was a pretty quiet neighborhood. The only thing you heard there was some little frogs right at night.
Mm-hmm.
It's kind of like in America, you hear crickets. Over there, you hear these little coquilles of frogs, right?
Yeah.
And I like them. I like the sound of them, and they help me fall asleep. So one night I started hearing this crowd. I couldn't determine what they were saying, but I know that they were very lively. I can't determine the language. I just heard a lot of loud murmurs.
Okay.
But looking down the hallway,
All
I
right.
start seeing outlines of people. And these outlines, it was almost like they were walking and it's something I didn't put in the book of detail. And now being a first time book writer, I was like, doggone it, why
Mm-hmm.
didn't I put that in there? It
Right.
was almost like these people were walking down in a parade style or in a single file line
In your
and
hallway?
in the hallway.
Okay.
And they never turned their attention towards me. It was just like they were just coming and going in the hallway.
All right.
And what seemed to be all night, but in reality, it might have only been a few minutes or an hour. I don't know.
Okay.
And they just kept passing on. And you can see them. It was almost like a side view, but you can see the shape of the heads up to the
Mm-hmm.
shoulder line, and then everything kind of just blended in.
Okay. Well, let me ask you
And
something. Were they, how's this? Even though I know what you're saying, could only really, like the upper body was more visible than the lower body.
mhm.
Were they semi-transparent or were they more substantial or
No, and that's is a great question. And it was basically just a sharper image of a shadows,
like an outline kind of like,
right?
yeah. Okay.
And there was no, it was one dimensional, and it wasn't
Mm-hmm.
like there was a smoke or any real footsteps or noise. It was just
Okay.
these shadow things going throughout. And I remember that, oh my goodness, what is this in my apartment? So as a little kid, I climbed over the crib and I closed the door.
You're like, I'm not
Yeah,
having none of this.
that'll show them,
Yeah.
and then hide under the blankets, which is always everybody knows the force field against all
Everybody knows that,
those.
even adults,
Yeah,
I'll make sure my feet are under the covers
yeah,
and then the head. And that's it.
yep. Make sure your feet don't dangle on the
Oh no.
corners. so so I did that, and what happened was the hallway got a little bit just a slightly brighter, but
Uh-huh.
I can see the feet of these shadows walking by. and I didn't know what to do at that
And you know
point.
what's really funny? Because a lot of people, children and adults, describe that where they've seen, like you said, they'll hear and sometimes see, but hear like the murmur of voices, but you can never exactly make out what they're saying. Okay, it's like a murmur, like, but it's really weird how it's similar. People will describe that, like, yeah, I heard somebody talking or laughing, or sometimes even like a party, but you can't exactly make out what the conversation is about. And so, what happened? Was that the one time thing, or did you ever have that experience again?
Well, in that apartment, it happened a few times,
Oh, okay, okay,
and after a while, I didn't even bother closing the door because to me, it's like, is this going to happen?
right.
And it didn't really bother me, but that stuck in my mind now almost 40 some years later, and I never really talked about it with anybody. And it wasn't up until the book came out and my mom actually read the book. I said, I didn't know this was happening. I go, yeah,
Wow. So you were the only one that was having this experience then in the
yes.
household?
Hmm.
Interesting. Interesting. And that's the thing, like that you're thinking, okay, I'm living in a tent in a I don't know how many floors, but in a condominium building, what is this, parade of people? And you're thinking, okay, either because it sounds, were you a budding psychic medium? Or was there something in that place, in that land, or something, or maybe something was the apartment? Who knows? Did they ever go in your room, or did they always stay in the hallway?
They always stayed in the hallway, very respectful, thankfully. And with these apartment buildings, we're on the 10th floor.
Right.
Normally, in homes I've ever been where it's been some sort of experience. So it either been like a Rambler style, at
Yeah.
most two-level house.
Right.
But I would have never thought, and now I know better because this is the concept of my podcast. Let's find out because I learned so much from the guests, not only through the interviews, but mostly on the pre and post interviews.
Right.
That's when the real knowledge, when the real download hits, and a bit is a bit of a selfish podcast because I'm doing it to learn things about what's going on throughout my life, but to also make sense of everybody else and what's happening and the stories they bring. So
Yeah, of course. But
yeah,
you know what? That's in this field, it's like beware the person that says that they know everything about a subject. That's like, usually that's not accurate. So what happened up till what age did you live here at that condo?
that was probably up until see, I want to say 78, maybe
Okay, so
something
you
like
were
that.
okay. And then after you moved out, did you ever have other experiences?
I did
So
several,
it was
and
you. It was you. I'm just
it's,
kidding.
it seems or there's something in the bloodline in my mom's side of the family. I don't know. It's very possible. So what happened shortly after that? My mother, she moved to the states because she got a job, so she left with my
Okay.
grandma for a little while,
Okay.
and grandma's house, grandma's apartment. She only lived on the third floor,
Okay.
but surprise, things happen in that neighborhood as well.
Ooh. Oh, oh, oh. There you go.
Yeah.
Let me ask you just out of curiosity, and you might not have known this. How old was that building? Had it been erected for a long time, or you don't know at this point?
Okay. Oh, so the one I was living at in the apartment,
Yeah.
10th floor.
Yeah.
I don't know much about it. It seems like it's been there for a long time,
Right.
and all I remember is there was two neighborhoods, and
Okay.
there was a iron because everything iron gates all over the place, right? The windows, the doors.
Right. Right.
Excuse me. That's how that goes, and then there was another set of buildings across the street, and everything was separated with like an iron bars, like a wall,
Right.
right?
Like the grill work and all that. I know what you're
Yeah,
talking about.
very
Yeah.
beautiful, and I think,
Ironworks. Yeah.
yeah,
Hmm.
and you don't get that much here in the states.
Right. Right.
I
But I
think
know what you're
maybe
talking
in
about. It's like decorative. It's not just like yeah, it's decorative also, but it serves a purpose also of like over the windows and things like that. But yeah.
yeah, and what I remember is across the parking lot there was a large field that was not developed. There was no houses there, nothing.
Okay.
A lot of large overgrowth. I don't know the history of that land, unfortunately. Actually, I don't know much of the history of that island. because once I
Okay.
came here, I kind of divorced myself, not from the culture,
No,
but
I
I
know
try.
what you're saying.
Yeah,
I know.
but I
When you're a kid, you're like, you
yeah
don't pay attention to those things. It's like, I'm just asking you, but sometimes, like I said, sometimes people, pull their hair out when they have a weird something going on in a building or a location and they think it's something that happened. And I said, might predate it. It might be something that happened on the land. But sometimes it's a real, real difficult thing to verify one way or the other, especially when you're a kid. When you're a kid, like you said, you're thinking about other things, like you took it in stride. Hey, I've got a people walking up and down my hallway. It's like, all right, you just left your door open. So there you go.
yeah, because it's one of those things, and you hit it right there. When you're a kid, you're a little more accepting of things.
Yes. Yes.
You might not question it as much because it seems like it's normal. It's
Mm-hmm.
not till we start growing older, where we start developing our own ideas or maybe influenced by other people's opinions, that things kind
Sure.
of change a little bit.
Yes.
So
Yes.
it's almost would be great if we could go back to that age, and I don't know, maybe our brains are different where we can receive better.
Yeah. No,
But
I've talked to plenty of people that have like which is why I asked you childhood experiences, and when they had them, they're very accepting of it. Especially, they're like, oh, and some of them even think, doesn't everybody see like the ghost or they kind of sometimes assume everybody else sees the same thing as they do, and later on they find out no, not everybody does. Like, well, what you just said that your mom had no idea that you're
no,
seeing this, and so obviously she never told you she had her own experiences, right?
no, in fact, it wasn't even until I'm going to say around 2001 or two. She lived in this house. It's Manassas or Woodbridge area in Virginia. It's a Northern Virginia area just outside of DC, about 30 minutes.
Okay.
And that house was always very active. Now, I didn't live there that long, but she would tell me the stories of the old man that lived there.
Okay.
And it was interesting. That's where I've also, because I moved in there for a little while because I was trying to transition from, a young man that stayed going broke, going back to mom's for a little bit.
All
And
right.
mom, I'm sorry I messed up. She goes, okay, but don't stay here too long.
Right.
Well, define too long, right?
That's up to
So
interpretation
yeah,
kind of deal.
but no, if it were up to my mom, I stay in that house forever.
I
You
know. I
know,
know.
so
Believe me, I know. But yeah. But let me tell you something. So let me ask you, was something going on in that house that you said that was a Manassas? Did she did she have was it an older house, or did you when you went there, did you start seeing or experiencing things?
yes, on the second, and that's
Okay.
one of the things I do talk about that one on the in the book. Now that was a new development at that time,
Okay.
and it was a lot of forest. You see a lot of wildlife in the area, and Virginia is known for a lot of things, but
Mhm.
certain counties, all they do is develop, develop, develop. If it's not a data center, it's new homes. If not new homes, it's new townhouses.
Mhm.
And there's got to be something to that, to where you're encroaching on land that may not have needed to be
True.
leveled and to build. So I'm pretty sure with the history, that type of, well, the haunted history of Virginia in itself, not only with
Mhm.
Civil War, but there's a lot of sightings of cryptids in Virginia,
Sure.
from Bigfoot to werewolves
Mhm.
and their own folklore. There had to have been some sort of disturbance in that new development to have these things. I don't know about the neighbors, but I know that house definitely, because I experienced it and I saw it.
How about your mom? Did she have experiences, or was it just you that, well, let me ask you, what's this? What kind of experiences did you have?
No, I'm glad you asked, because now that the perfect image of that being is in my mind, I'll never forget it. And I did my best to recreate it in the book, as I used a little AI program to generate a drawing,
Okay.
because I can't draw but a stick figure. My daughter's
Uh,
she's the artist of the family, me not so much, right?
mhm.
And so there was one night, I'm gonna guess at about 2002, when I moved in. And at that point, my girlfriend moved in for a little while because we were to get an apartment. So we were staying in my room. It's a small bed. And for two people to fit in a twin bed, it's not the best.
Oh, yeah.
you
That's
know,
tough.
and she was a lot taller than I am, and then it's just legs and arms everywhere. So it was easy. So the reason I mentioned that is
Okay.
because it's easy. If I were to turn left or right, she would wake up. Same thing. So this one night, I feel this feeling of dread coming over me. Extremely dehydrated, and I wake up. I could not move.
Okay.
Only thing I could move was my eyes, maybe my head a little bit.
Okay.
And that's the first time. And I later learned down in life, as I say, we're learning all the time. That was my first experience with sleep paralysis.
Sleep paralysis, exactly.
And
Or old hag syndrome.
it's very terrifying. And
Yes.
I'm not afraid to admit,
Mm-hmm.
I'm a tough guy with a lot of things, but things like that, nah, you're not everybody's the same. Everybody's equal.
Yeah, exactly.
And so this night, dark as can be, but I could still see this thing floating. It was towards between my ankles and shin, towards the foot of the bed.
Oh
Right,
boy, here we go.
right, right over me is this thing. It's shaped like a miniature tornado. Right, it's smoke, and it's
Ooh.
doing this thing. You can see it was black on black. The eyes were black, the
Oh.
body was smoky black, and it
Okie
had
dokie
these
smoky.
long arms, which
Oh,
fists like this, but they were
buddy.
almost the size of mallets, huge things, right? So as I'm looking up, I can't even speak because I'm drooling. I'm speaking nonsense. And then
Okay.
next thing I know, it takes its arms and just goes down like this. The breath and oxygen out of my body just comes out. And
Okay.
if anybody ever experienced falling backwards and not prepared for it, it's the same when you the breath gets knocked out of you.
Yes.
But this is continually one, two,
Wow.
three, four, and I'm moving. I managed to tilt my head to my back then my girlfriend ex now, and I'm trying to get help. She's snoring away like nothing's happening.
Okay.
And I turned my head a little bit again, and it's still there. And what felt to be for an hour, so it might have been a few minutes. Sometimes it's
Okay.
hard to gauge when these things happen, kind of like what I was
Sure.
talking about with the shadow people.
Yes.
But finally, I passed out again because I had no breath left in me.
Okay.
Next day, daylight comes in. I wake up and I'm mad. I'm angry. And then
Okay.
I wake her up. She goes, "What's up?" I go, "Yo, last night I'm trying to get you to help me. You wouldn't wake up." Because what are you talking about? I didn't hear anything. Impossible because the bed was shaking as this was happening. I was flopping around a little bit. You didn't wake up to help me. Because I don't know. Nothing happened. I didn't hear anything. And it's one of those things people say automatically. Well, you had a dream. Well, a fact for most of those who are semi skeptics, there's a difference between an experience and a dream,
Mm-hmm.
and you'll know the difference between the two when you have these type of experiences. And that one really kind of messed me up, my friend, because later down the road, and I was at that point, I was still a sports entertainer. I was still a pretty decent athlete,
Mm-hmm.
and my cardio was great, and like most athletes. One day, I had this thing where I could not breathe. I thought I swear to you, I thought I was dying. That was
Okay.
the end. I'm coming home, Elizabeth. Right moment, and I go, girl, you gotta take me to the hospital. She goes, what's wrong? I go, I don't know what's wrong, but I
Okay.
feel like I'm gonna die. I said, okay, well, drama queen, I'll take you to the hospital, right? And I got in there, and she said, we don't know what's wrong with you, but take this medicine. Of course, I was there for a little while. I always take this medicine, right?
Right.
The very next week, her and I we went to a one of these Celtic festivals. At that point, it was in Richmond, Virginia. I like Renaissance Celtic stuff. It's a lot of fun.
Mm-hmm.
Great to learn this
Yes.
kind of things, even though it's not really part of my culture. It's fine by me. I
Oh, of
like their
course. Yeah.
culture.
Yeah.
And walking down towards the end of the day, same thing happened. It was like night and day. Like somebody flipped a switch. And I said, shoot. I go, guess what? We need to take me tonight again. Okay. Went back, and then same hospital. It was the same staff, same nurses. They recognized
Okay.
me. which is kind of rare. Usually, they
Right.
different shifts, right?
Mm-hmm.
He goes, "You haven't learned your lesson yet, have you?" I go, "Why?" He goes, "You know you have asthma, right?" I said, "What are you talking about?" I'm like in my mid 20s at that point. And I was a
Right.
little bit of a smart ass, and I hope I don't insult anybody. But I go, "Isn't asthma something for like nerds and geeks?"
Yeah.
Right? He goes, "No, stop messing around." He goes, "This is kind of serious. So here's what we're gonna do. They put me on a nebulizer and all this, and I traced that back. I call it that darn tornado because that thing that did that thing that night to me. The description of the tornado, I didn't have issues up until that time when that happened.
Okay.
So I think it's in my opinion that from that experience, that's what changed my health from that point.
Well, let
Yeah.
me ask you, the time between you had that experience, which by the way, most of the times when you hear people having sleep paralysis, once they're able to move any little thing, that's it. It breaks the paralysis. But you're telling me you were able to move a little bit, but it's still you're still like basically how much time between the sighting of that thing versus the first time that you had that experience of not being able to breathe? Was it right away, right after, or how much time went by?
It was less than a year.
Because when you started the first, I'm going to put on my paranormal investigator hat real
Yeah.
quick. If you would have told me that story, well, first of all, that first encounter, I said, what was going on in your life around that time? Okay, because let me tell you something. When you're talking, what you just described, that whirlwind, blacker than black, and stuff, that's like,
Mhm.
whoa, we're talking here more than likely 80% non-human entity. But I would have said, what's going on? Who are you around with, or what's the triggering event, or something? And then fast forward when you're telling me that other experience that you had for a minute, I was like, was he having a panic attack? Because you hear people that they have that can't breathe, but now you're telling me that you go to the ER and they're saying you've got asthma,
Yeah.
and you're like, well, okay, how did I miss that? Especially since you're an athlete,
Yeah.
that I have asthma. That's I don't want to say fascinating, but that's wow. And you think that the nexus of that asthma was that experience you had with whatever that was,
1000%. I find no other way to really attribute
ah,
that because there was never any signs,
right prior to that?
right?
How many times did you have that? For lack, let's go down with the
Mhm.
asthma. How many times after that did you have that experience? I mean, now obviously they gave you a nebulizer, but did that ever happen again, or what? Or did
My
it?
Oh no, this is a great question. Now we're talking about sleep paralysis or that
Right.
entity.
Well, no, right here you have the sleep paralysis, and then you're a few months later. Let me ask you, did you right away did you realize, or was it the second time when he's talking asthma there, you're like, wait a minute, was the
It,
visitation of this thing what opened the door?
it took me a while to figure it out because I
Okay.
was trying to think what in the world. Because I mean, I do now to be completely open. I do have several family members with that have several health issues, and
Okay.
everybody has their own. Somebody could
Sure.
could be have asthma. One could be diabetic. One could be
Mm-hmm.
anything.
Sure.
Choose your flavor. We're all going to get something, right?
Right.
But I can only attribute it to that because if and I'm not a doctor or anything like that, but I figure had asthma been creeping up on me, I would have started feeling this during training, during weight training,
That's what I'm thinking.
doing
I'm thinking,
drills. Yeah.
yeah, I would have thought that by
Mhm.
then you would have had some type of breathing, problem or something. And that is wow. So here they give you a nebulizer and send you on your way. And what
Mhm.
happens after that?
Really, just kind of rando kind of things,
Mm-hmm.
but nothing to that extreme
Okay.
as far as being, I would call it a physical attack.
Okay.
Even though there was no physical contact hand to
Yes.
hand or body to body, not
Mm-hmm.
like it was hovering over me, stealing my breath. Like, I
Wow.
guess what would it be? Who would that be? Like a succubus, right? Is that what they would do or something like that?
Well, see, the succubus or the incubus, which is a male or female, that's
Yeah.
more of a sexual attack,
Oh, definitely not
basically.
that. I would have
It
preferred
wasn't a
that.
sexual, but it could have been. There's other stuff out there that's non-human that, could, and I would have said, who are you? I mean, considering that from what you're telling me, this came out of left field. Were you at some place or who were you with? Something that maybe jump shipped and, attached itself to you?
It could be possible, and I want to go back. I misspoke when I said I would have preferred. I would have not preferred that as far as the sexual part. That was a miss. I
Well,
was misunderstood on
no,
that one. So yeah,
what?
yeah.
From what I understand, the men or women, because remember, it's the opposite sex depending on the succubus is for the and the incubus is for. It's from what I understand, it's even though everybody's it's sexual, but basically it drains your life force. Anybody that's ever had that type of experience, it's like no, this was not enjoyable. It ends up like because again, you're talking a non-human entity. All right. So yeah, it ends up, and I know men are different, and you tell them, well, if I gotta be haunted, I might as well make it a sexual. But no, it's usually what it is it drains your life force, for lack of a better word. All right. So, and again, I guess I'm always I'm the kind of person I always like to see, and sometimes you never find out the origin. What was the
Mm.
triggering event? And the reason why is because I've had a lot of cases like this where people go to certain places. Not, and by this, I'm not necessarily saying that you're ghost hunting or doing nothing like that. You're just going someplace or being with somebody and just hanging something that just things will latch onto you, especially if you're stressed out, um, because it'll thin out your aura and or sometimes it's even an affinity. And like you'll have people that are angry. I'm using the anger, but it could be anything. Angry, like attracts like. Got an angry person, you're going to attract angry energy or entities, whether they're human or non-human. So that's why I was wondering, like, what was going on in your life at that time when that happened. Besides the fact that you were, sounds like you were a young guy, an athlete, you know.
Yeah, I was up to a lot of no good, to tell you the truth.
Oh, okay. Here we go.
Um, because at that time, you travel a lot,
Sure.
go to different towns, you entertain, you go to hotels, motels,
Mm-hmm.
wherever. You're always with a pack of people, things that should have landed me in jail, and thankfully somebody was looking after me.
Right.
Did not happen.
Right.
But it goes back to maybe childhood because when you're young and there's no father in your life, and then when
Mm-hmm.
you make contact with that side of the family, yeah, they kind of like want to hang out with you, but they don't really want to.
Sure.
So it's one of those things that maybe there's some sort of not I would say trauma, but some sort of childhood anger
Yes,
or
it is. No,
resentment
no,
towards.
believe it or not, yes, no, trauma
Uh,
is the appropriate word for it. Trauma is the appropriate word for it. But yes, no, I understand. And a lot of times, I mean, that's a whole nother show, but
yeah,
yes, that's the appropriate word for it. But yeah, did you ever see that thing again?
no, no. Now, what's interesting is almost every place I've gone to live at, minus one, which I would have thought that would have been the place to have stuff happen, did not.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I went. I moved to an apartment not too far from my mother's. I like being close to my mother. I got to check on her, see how she's doing.
Believe me, I
Mama's
understand.
boy.
Yes.
And we moved to this apartment, which basically it was a maybe a 600 square foot small apartment over a garage somewhere. It's $700 a month. Back then, it was a lot of money, but it was better
Yes.
than paying $1,000, 1,200 for an apartment.
Sure.
And in this place, there was some activity as well. And then moving to about three places after that, more activities. Now, right about 2007, when I moved to this different neighborhood in
Okay.
Stafford, Virginia. Stafford, Virginia
Okay.
has a lot of rich history.
Mm-hmm.
Of course, Virginia.
Right.
There was a time I was still with the same. It was a long term relationship. Long before I
Okay.
got married,
Okay.
we moved to this place, and there would be this is several instances, not of sleep paralysis or any type of attacks, but and I don't hear spirits. I don't see spirits,
Mm-hmm.
so I don't have that gift. But when things wants to happen, whether you have it or not, they're gonna make the presence known.
Yes.
There were several times in that home where I would be having a full blown conversation, which I thought would have been my girlfriend at the time.
Oh,
And it looked like her, it walked like her, never spoke. But I would be telling her about my day or something, and she would never respond. So I started like, this is very rude. I'm having a conversation. They go, hey, why aren't you answering me? There's nobody there. And I go across the hallway. I look for her, I go, girl, why are you being rude? You mad at me? He goes, what are you talking about? I go, I was just having a talking for 10, 15 minutes.
but let me ask you, when you know how, and I know what you mean. You know how sometimes you think, hey, that person's in the room next door because maybe you see some, maybe you
Mm-hmm.
see a movement, and you're thinking, who else is it gonna be? Was that what was happening with you? You saw some type of movement or something that made you believe that she was in a certain place, and you started having a conversation with her?
No,
Or what?
no, I'm sorry, Don. That's a great observation what you have there. But no, is I would picture it like if I'm cooking a meal, if I'm washing dishes,
Okay,
like right now, if I were in this house, we have a very small. It was a very small kitchen, like my house
right,
now. My wife could be doing dishes or cooking it, or we reverse. Sometimes we take turns, whatever. That's
right,
what we do. I could be talking to her, and know she's there, right? So
right.
easy, same size kitchen type of thing. And I think at that time I would have been cooking something, but she was maybe like 3 feet from me, 4 feet from me.
Wow.
But it was her. It was the same body, face, everything was. It was. I call it the mimicker, because it mimicked the same look.
Uh-huh.
And I said, normal conversations. I turn around because I heard it walking. But she
Oh
just walked
crap.
away. She just walked
Okay.
away from me. So that's why I went over there. Go,
Right,
darling, you're
like,
being very rude. I mean, you're okay. He goes, what are you talking about? I've been here for like 20 minutes. Goes, but I was just talking to
oh.
you. Goes, I didn't. Not only did I not hear you talk, you weren't talking to me. And that happened quite
Yes.
frequently in that place. And after a while, I was like, I guess it's back.
And was that the only place that you had that experience? In that
It
one a little apartment?
No, that was. There's more to come, and which I cover a lot, and I remember the crib. But I'm gonna give you a good one
Okay.
because this one I got some validation recently from my cousin about this one. My
Okay.
mother's birthday last summer. She's a gifted one in the family, my cousin, and
Okay.
she can tell you some things. But
Okay.
up until that point, I haven't seen her in years. She was like my big sister, same situation, single mother raising a kid kind of thing. So her and I were really bonded when we were
Okay.
young. And when I lived in my grandmother's apartment in Puerto Rico, it
Mm-hmm.
was very nice, not too far from Condado, from the beach, and we were on the third floor. Over the parking lot, there was another, just a house there for some reason. No reason. There's a house there,
Okay.
and in that house, I think at that point I might have been about 5 years old. And in this house, I had the palm trees, the best described it like an old Spanish house with the
Mm-hmm.
with the roof that's got they got these a lot of, I think, Arizona and Florida. I don't know what they're called. The tiles, Spanish tiles or
Terracotta
something.
tiles. The
Thank you, because
Spanish tiles, yeah,
mhm,
that are orange, yes.
I would have never been able to say that word. I've written it down, but thank you. So I never saw anybody come and go in this house. It's a pretty house. There's a lot of overgrowth. You can see the
Mm-hmm.
iguanas go through the yard or the little lizards. So
Right.
in my opinion, in my mind, nobody lives there, right?
Right.
Never saw anybody. And I lived with my grandma's for about a little over a year. Or about the same time in the afternoon, and I think I was in kindergarten at that time. And which is how this is how I put the pieces together of where I was what year.
Okay.
So I think this is 78 or 79. I don't know. I'm dating myself. So during that year, ABBA was super huge, right?
Yes. Yeah, you're
And
right. ABBA
then
was super huge, yes.
ABBA Menudo was super huge at the point,
Mm-hmm.
and if I don't know how much people know about this Spanish culture, South America and the Caribbean. We have our own stars. We have our own TV shows.
Right.
It's a whole different world, but
La
in
telenovela.
yeah, yep. And if you wanted to watch anything kind of current, everything you could watch Chips, you can watch all these shows that they were dubbed in Spanish.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
So why did I bring about the Spanish part up? So every time around the same time in the afternoon, music would play from this house
Okay.
loudly,
All right.
and it would play ABBA, the same song over and over again.
Wow.
And the song, I don't know how many people are very well knowledgeable in ABBA. ABBA's a great group. I'm a metalhead, but if
Yes.
you play ABBA with me, I will sing along to it.
Yeah, of course.
Great voices. I think they were from
Mm-hmm.
Switzerland or Sweden or something like
Yeah,
that.
Sweden. They're Swedish, I believe. Yeah.
Mhm. So why would a Swedish group sing in Spanish that song Chiquitita, right?
Yes, exactly. That's right.
So that would be the song that was playing over and over again in that house.
Right. And how long would that go on for?
I would say at least an hour.
Now, did you ever find out, was it an empty house? Was it abandoned? Or that's weird.
I believe it was because the whole time I was there, I never saw a person go in or out. No one car came in the driveway, left the driveway, nothing. Not a soul.
Wow.
Right. So moving forward, I moved to US by DC area about 81.
Mm-hmm.
We moved to the United States. We had nothing. We had like a bag and a little black and white TV we took with us.
Okay.
And we all do the typical two families, five kids,
Right.
in a duplex or wherever, looking back, it's probably the
Yeah.
best times of my life. The
Right.
struggle was the best part.
Everybody's squeezing together.
Yep, yep. And we used to do the whole thing, go not for food, but if you wait a certain time in the nice neighborhoods, you want good furniture, you wait
Yes.
and then you
Yep.
grab the stuff. You
Yep.
might take a chance on a mattress, but either the
Yep.
mattress or the floor, right?
Yep. Yes.
Yeah,
Absolutely. Yeah, but like you say, and you know
yeah,
what? And it's really funny because especially as a child, you know how sometimes people spend boatloads of money on getting stuff for their kids, and kids don't care. Kids just want to be kids and be happy. So like what you're saying, we went through all these things, but it was great times. When I look back on it, because you kids usually, unless you bring them up that way, they're not into status stuff. Status symbol or nothing like that. Nah. You know. So here you are, and you move. And I guess Diego, it sounds like maybe what you're telling me is maybe with the exception of one place, you almost had an experience at these different locations where you lived as you were growing up.
yes.
Wow.
And it's even up until here in this house, things
Wow.
happen. But I'm not. This is where it gets good. I'm gonna close the loop on this one story, which you can read about in my book,
Okay.
and which and for a first time book writer, I wish I would have spent a little more time with more details. But I just want to get the story out there because
Sure.
my hope is that somebody would read it and email me or talk to me and say, "I think I figured out what's going on there." That's pretty much I put it out there as a line for anybody. I don't care who it is. I'll take the information. One night in this duplex, there was everybody was asleep, so we all slept on the floor because we didn't have, like I said, we had the mattress on the floor. We didn't have anything
Okay.
fancy. I wake up one night and I start hearing music. Right, I'm like, okay, why is everybody's asleep? And back then, nobody played the loud car stereos at night. Back then we were a little more polite than we are now.
Right. Yeah. No. No. I know. It was like bad form. Yeah.
Yeah, and because you go into a neighborhood, you turn down the music, you park your car, you're good.
Sure.
Two
Yeah.
reasons: because if your stereo is really good, you're not going to see it the next day. So you got to really play it safe, right?
Uh-huh.
And then this music starts playing. It's like, who's playing music? Everybody. I get up, right? Is that ABBA song playing? Yo, listen,
What?
it
What?
get, it gets better because I get up and I didn't want to wake my mother up, but it's like I got up slowly. It's like, well, she's asleep. I go to my aunt's room. She's fast asleep. I go to see my cousins, all three of them on the floor. They're asleep. No night lights were on. Nothing was on. TV, no radio. We don't really have radio either. But that music from ABBA was coming from downstairs.
And you're the only one that's hearing it, obviously.
I'm the only one. And this is not a dream because I'm walking around the house physically,
Mm-hmm.
and like I said, the difference between experience and a dream. So I'm sitting there at the top of the stairwell, like a little. I was just a little guy. And for me, the music was so loud. I put my little hands over my ears, like just make it stop, right?
Right.
But I could still hear it, even if it's a little bit muffled.
Okay.
I was like, shoot, I tell you what, I'm gonna go downstairs. Brave little kid, a little too brave, I think.
Huh.
And I start going downstairs, starts getting louder and louder. And I'm looking at, well, the TV's not on. I look outside, there's nobody outside, and it's pitch black. Only by moonlight or the street light. That's the only
Right.
thing kind of light you get at night.
Yeah.
And I'm walking through the tiny living room, and then there's a kitchen, and there's a door to go to the outside. And the closer I got to the door to the outside, magically stopped playing. I'm like,
Oh,
ain't this something?
you know
And
what? That's incredible.
mm, and
And
I
it,
don't know how to explain that.
did that only happen with that one time, or did it ever happen again while you were there?
I haven't heard that song since. Not even on the radio. If I look for it, it's there, but I refuse to listen to it because I don't want to stir up something.
That is so unusual.
Hmm.
Because here we're talking a totally like different location, totally
Hmm.
hundreds of miles apart.
Yes.
That is wow. And what did you do? You went back and it's like, I'm gonna go back to sleep and I'm just gonna be like, when you heard it, were you just curious or did you feel any type of like, did you wig out a little bit, even though you were a kid?
At that point, I'm thinking I was a little bit scared, but then I made the connection because I heard this song before.
Okay,
But why would it be playing here?
right.
And after a while, I didn't give it much thought, and it's almost like somebody just closed the book on it because I never thought about it since.
Yes. Right, right. Yeah.
Like,
And you know what? That's the thing. And I tell everybody, because there's people, well, nowadays, especially, after this thing of all these paranormal shows that everybody's going ghost hunting, but which I consider the best stories are the people that things happened to them. They weren't ghost hunting. They weren't looking to have the experience, and they have it,
mhm.
you know. And like you said, especially when you're younger, yeah, you're not going to paranormal. You're thinking other things, but later on, when you become an adult and you look back and you wait a minute, that's not normal. Whatever the experience was, either I heard something, saw something, felt something that that might have been paranormal, or that might have been a ghost, or that might have like whatever.
Yeah, but that
Um,
wasn't until decades later where I started really putting the
right,
pieces.
that you started thinking, okay,
Yeah, yup. And then just recently, last year when my mom's a big milestone birthday, we had a family reunion kind of deal. My
okay,
cousin was there, and I haven't talked to her in a long time. We were talking about paranormal stuff because I have my cousin's wife, my other cousin's wife.
mm-hmm,
She's from Cuba,
okay,
and she has a lot of stories from the time she was there up until they got on the raft in the ocean, make it to America. It's a story. It'll break your heart, right? But she's
oh,
very gifted, very gifted. She knows a lot
okay,
and communicates. But I was telling her this story about what happened because she wants to know more about my podcast. I was like, yeah, I'm gonna talk about podcast in my family, and some of them are very accepting. Some of them are like, oh, I'll get to it, right? I understand. I understand.
yeah,
So then my cousin overhears it. She goes, "What about that house?" I go, "You know the one because she lived the first floor with my aunt." I go, "You know that house that was there? Nobody was there." He goes, "Yeah, I remember that house." He goes, "Don't you think it's weird?" She goes, "Yeah, I never saw anybody ever coming out of that house." So I got a little bit of validation, and just I'm gonna be rude. I have my phone here,
go right ahead. Don't worry about it.
and it's gonna be the first time I ever shared this with anybody outside of actually I didn't even share with my wife.
Yay.
She sent me this text on Facebook.
Okay.
She hasn't stopped talking about the house since because now it's been haunting her about knowing more about the house, right? And the more she goes, they did used to play music there, and you're right, it was that song. I'm like, are you kidding me? She goes, no, no, this is it, right? So she sends me. She went on Google Maps or whatever that Google thing is, right?
Yes, yes.
Okay, so she goes, I don't know if Casey. She sent me the picture of the house.
Okay.
So I don't know because there's a lot of glare from.
Did she? Okay, let me ask you something because I can't
Hmm?
see. There's glare. Is it at the street level or
Yes.
overhead? Okay, so it's Google Maps, not yeah, because there's a satellite shot, and then there's the other one that's like if you're driving in front of the house. There you go,
Yes.
a little
So
bit
I
better.
took the light
Okay,
off.
okay, so there's yeah, there's okay, I see it.
Hmm.
There's the house, yes,
And
and so
so,
it's still
yes,
there.
it's still there to this day. Now I don't know about the trees. They might have done a couple of different paint jobs because when I was there, it wasn't that nice, to tell you the truth. And
Right,
she
yeah,
goes,
that doesn't mean anything. It could have been bought, and somebody moved in there, and
yeah,
yeah,
somebody flipped it. Tourists might stay
yeah,
there. Who knows?
yeah.
But she goes, she hasn't been able to stop thinking about that house since I brought that subject up.
Okay.
And then she goes, "Here's the house. Remember this one?" I go, "Yeah, that's it." And yeah, so it's kind of one of those things. I'm finally. She read the book. Actually, she goes. She went to find out more about it. She goes, "Here's the picture." And because I didn't remember the address. I mean, hell if I knew, but she remembered it.
Diego, or is the book on Amazon, or where do you have it? Do you?
It is on Amazon. It's currently on paperback. You can download it on your Kindle. And I just recently found out as an audio book too. My publisher didn't let me know, so it's a surprise for me.
Let me ask you, what's the title of the book?
I remember the crib,
Hold
and
on.
I believe that it costs a lot less with the Kindle version, which is
Yes.
great because
Here
once
we
you buy it straight to your.
go.
Mhm.
Yeah, no, no, keep talking. I'm gonna
Oh, okay.
trying to bring it up on the screen.
Oh, thank
Okay.
you for that. Yeah, and it's a rather short book. It's about 70 to 80 pages, but I just wanted to talk about here's the experience, here's what happened, and I leave it open to anybody to tell me what their opinions are because I'm not one of
Okay.
those that what I think is the way because it can't be.
Right. No, I
So
I I
I'm
know
all,
what you're saying as far as and you know what? Some of those experiences sometimes, like you said, you weren't like now, like what I was saying, you're not there with a recorder or a camera or anything to take proof or, it happened. So basically all you have, you're the sole witness of what happened. It's not like nowadays that they got the thermometer and the thing and the FLIR and yeah, it's like, hold
no,
on,
I
let me
don't
see.
think back then. I don't even think we had micro cassettes. It was like a an old generic
Right,
recording. I don't know. It was like a rectangle thing, and
right.
but you don't really think about those things back then.
Let
It's
me
it's
see.
just
Okay, here
something
we
like
go.
happens.
Of
Oh,
course,
thank you for that.
exactly.
Mhm,
Yes, of course. And I remember the crib, and this is great because basically what you've got is that group of people in the
mhm.
hallway, like what you were talking about.
Yeah.
That's great. And okay, so there we go. Okay, so they can find it on Amazon. I remember the crib. All right, for anybody that wants to find it. And like you said, you have the Kindle version and you have the audio version. So let me now that you're looking back,
Mhm.
that you said that your mom, your maternal line, did now that you wrote the book, have any of your family members come up and said, by the way, and they tell you a story and you're like, I didn't know that. Has anybody done that yet with you?
Not yet. Now, my mom read it. She loved it. She because I put a little bit of humor in it because
Right.
that's just kind of my nature. My cousin, the one that sent me the picture, she bought it. She downloaded and read it. She told me, "Yeah, I understand what you're saying." Not into details, but definitely about that house.
Okay.
That was kind of. I think that kind of struck a chord on her, in her,
Okay.
and she hasn't. Every time I take a text, I get. She hasn't stopped talking about it.
She's and sometimes, like said, that moment in time has come and gone because obviously now you said, now it looks different, like you said, and so it's almost like a mystery that's going to remain a mystery because there's no
Yeah.
way you can ever go back and find out, hey, was this place really empty and who was playing ABBA loudly for an hour? And then let me tell you, the best thing is what you're saying. Here you are, hundreds of miles away,
Mm-hmm.
and you're waking up and you're a kid, and what do you hear? ABBA. That's incredible. And but let me tell you, that whole thing, that experience that you had where you see this thing at the foot of the bed. I think that's got to be one of those bad experiences when you're sleeping, that you all of a sudden you see something and you're like, man, and not being able to move. I know for a lot of people that sleep paralysis really does a number on them, big time. And it's surprising because supposedly the thing of the sleep paralysis is, your brain shuts off movement so that you won't thrash around when you dream, you know. And that sometimes you get ahead of yourself and you kind of wake up before that's disconnected from your brain. And I understand that that's what they call that the process of what to explain with sleep. But you have people that will have sleep paralysis, but only when they live in a certain location, especially when they have sightings. Like, in other words, they move away and then the sleep paralysis stops. And it's like, how does that work? If this was all my brain, me waking up, but my brain's still not letting me move, how is it that when I move to another place, that experience stopped? Was it, then, then you get that supernatural flavor in there. That's like, well, you could call it
Mhm.
sleep paralysis, but there was something else in the mix, but yeah, that cyclone kind thing, cloudy thing with black on black, that was like,
Yeah,
that must
I
have been horrendous.
I've never seen it since. Now I'm contemplating writing a second book because there's a few
Okay.
more things that I've had experience with. Not enough for a whole book, but
Okay.
this was not my first experience with sleep paralysis.
Okay.
And in fact, I had it. It was last January last year,
Okay.
and
All right.
that's because the reason I haven't written about it because I don't know how to start it
Okay.
because it was the most painful experience I've had in my life.
This last one?
And this
This
last one that happened within a
Okay.
year, yeah, a little over a year ago,
Okay.
that
What
I want to make sure if I write it that I put as much detail as possible because so I can help my listeners or the reader or just friends of mine know that
right.
this is why it wasn't a dream. Let me explain to you why.
Okay.
And but I'm contemplating. I don't know. I did the first one and I was scared to death to write one. And once it was published, I'm like, because I actually wrote it and then I left it there for a month. I didn't do
Uh-huh.
anything with it. So
Yes.
I told the publisher, I'll get it to you, but I want to pull the trigger, but I can't because just do it, man. You'll be okay. And I am okay because I get to meet wonderful people like you
Yeah,
to have me on
let
your
me tell you
show.
something
Yeah.
that there's a point that you got to execute, you got to like do it.
Mhm.
You did it. That's good.
Yeah.
So anyway, go ahead. You were saying that this is why this was such a horrible experience.
It was because just like the asthma issue. Well,
Mm-hmm.
this one left me with pretty severe back problems, and which I never really, as an athlete, once you start aging, things start popping up. Like my hips are bad and my knees are great, but
Mm-hmm.
I never had
Sure.
real bad issues with my back.
Okay.
Now, ever since that night, which my poor wife, so tiny little lady, had to pick up a 250-pound man out of the bed because I couldn't get out of bed.
Okay.
Let me tell you what happened last night, and it's one of those things I haven't talked about it yet to anybody on a show in private, a
Okay.
couple folks,
All right.
but I'm thinking there I might write about it. I don't know yet. I'm not ready. I'm not there yet. But a good friend of mine, I don't know if you ever met him, Nate Elwell. He's a great,
That name sounds familiar.
yeah, he's got a great show on YouTube. He's a para debunker. So what he takes a
Yeah.
lot of hoax videos out there, and he's like, here's why this is a hoax. He
Okay.
breaks it down because it does a lot of disservice to the work that we're kind of trying to do
Sure.
to bring these subjects to light. But then you have 20, 30 people kind of ruin it for all of us, make us all look foolish, but that's fine. But he said, why don't you start writing these? If it weren't for me writing these things down, some of them, the book wouldn't have been as long, right? It would have only been like a few stories. But
Right.
the issue with me writing things down is like almost the second I start writing them down, the activity goes to zero. It stops.
Uh-huh. Okay. Interesting.
And if not that I welcome it, I can't stop it to do what they want to do. But once I
Mm-hmm.
stop, things start happening again. But it's only when I start journaling, they will not do anything.
They. Why they? Or it? Or him or her? I'm just throwing a little bit of psychoanalysis in there. Why do you say it's they?
Nobody's ever asked me that question. Why they? And that's good.
Mm-hmm.
I'm glad you asked that.
Mm-hmm.
I only because the experiences have been different. Like there's been different presentations of these things happening to me. So if it's one doing these things in a different manner. But
Hmm.
I can say that the first experience with sleep paralysis compared to the second,
Right.
two completely different things. I think the second one might have been more extraterrestrial based
Okay.
instead of more of a paranormal. But these things kind of cross lanes anyway.
Oh no, yeah, there's a lot of now
Mhm.
crossovers with ufology, ETs, and a paranormal. Yes, absolutely.
And
I've spoken to people. When I was in Miami, I belonged to a group, UFO people, and we had moved on to present. I had countless people come to me and tell me that had paranormal. No, I'm sorry, the other way around. They had sighted a UFO. We're not even talking here abduction. We're just talking sightings. And all of a sudden, they started having paranormal stuff going on in their house. And I remember them coming to me and asking me, since they knew I have been doing paranormal investigations since the 90s. And they were asking me, I don't get it. What does, because remember, this is once upon a time UFOs are over here and ghosts and paranormal all over here. And they're asking me, why am I seeing what I think is a UFO? What does that have to do with me starting to have paranormal experiences or things happening in my house? And by the way, in some cases this was going on for years,
yeah,
okay? And they couldn't figure out the connection between one thing and the other, how that works. And that well, yeah. And let's not even go into, when we're talking here abduction, an abduction scenario. Um, I don't know. I'm sure you've heard of Skinwalker Ranch, right?
I have, yes.
Okay, they have that hitchhiker effect where people that have been out there, all right, even from before when Bigelow used to own the land, before this guy that's out there now, um, people that work plus even just people that you never were aware of, security, just people running the place, they would leave and go back home, and they were having paranormal experiences at home, hundreds of miles away. And some of the stuff when you listen or you read some of their experiences, like we're
Yeah.
talking like werewolf kind of sightings and like really bizarre stuff. That you would think, okay, and everybody thinks of Skinwalker Ranch as being more of like a UFO thing. So getting back to what you were saying now, that now you're thinking this has more of a what, a UFO extraterrestrial
It does
source.
because I might as well. I'll give you some small details on that.
Okay,
So when this happened in my bed, I'll tell you what I was wearing. I was wearing these red and black pajama bottoms, no shirt, because I
okay,
I I don't know about most people. I just sleep with a lot of blankets, but I always had the fans going. I like the sound of the fans,
okay,
oscillating, and the one on the ceiling. And then
okay,
something happened later down this night. The reason I think it's less paranormal, more extraterrestrial based, because it took me to a different location in this town to where it was cold. It was a January, which gets better. Coldest January night I can remember
okay,
around here. And this is farmland here where I'm at in West Virginia.
okay,
So found myself floating on what was a what I it was almost the equivalent of being on a gurney in a hospital, like you're being
okay,
pushed.
okay,
But there was no wheels. There was nobody next to me. But it was almost like I was in a see-through gurney, but it was floating, right?
okay,
I don't have the blankets on, but I didn't have my shirt on, and I still have the same pajamas on.
okay,
I felt the cold, but it was not. I was not shivering, but I knew it was cold. And to
okay,
this day, I can tell you what spot this happened because I can see it every day when I go to work and come home from work. It's like that's the farmland where they took me because I could see the hills and there's houses about half a mile from the hills, and I could see the outline of the houses. I go, that's where it happened. I told my wife,
okay,
and then what seemed to float for a while, I wound up in my bed again. 2 days later, not long after that, is when I had that issue with my back,
okay.
where there were these two. It felt like two spheres
Mm-hmm.
on the top of my back that I felt like I was on fire.
Okay.
And every time I moved, it would trigger pain all over my body. I could not move. not I was not paralyzed, but the
Mm-hmm.
pain paralyzed me,
Sure.
and I had my I could only reach my phone, move my arm.
Mm-hmm.
I text my wife. She was already up. I go, I hate to ask you this, but can you peel me out of bed? I can't move. She's like, what's wrong? I goes, I don't know. But this poor lady had to get me up and then found me a cane and then we'll go straight to the hospital.
Okay.
And they said it was long short. It was in a waiting room. I went in there, took the X-rays. I couldn't find anything because, but we see evidence of muscle recoil,
Right.
and I don't know what causes that because even though I still go to the gym and stuff like that, it's not like I used. To, I don't go hardcore like I used to because I can't.
Okay.
But it was like
So what
when
did
you're
they
in a
give
car
you? Give
accident,
you some muscle relaxer and
they give me a couple of shots, and but the shots work. But for me, like muscle relaxers and stuff, they don't work on me that much.
so basically you're still feeling the effect of that experience is what you're saying.
Yes, I have a slip disc now in my back, which was
Wow.
not present there prior to that because I went to X-rays before because of my hip.
Mm-hmm.
Because from wrestling, I've been hurt several times. But he goes, when did this happen? Were you in a car accident? What happened? Did you fall? I go, no, I don't know where this came from. And so that's a thing. I mean, that's something
Okay.
else to add to it. I
Right.
don't have as much issues with asthma anymore, but we trade one for the other. So that's why I feel it's more extraterrestrial based than paranormal because it took me to a different location while I was still awake. And,
Well,
you know,
you know what? That's very interesting. And something else that you might, there's something sometimes that's called mind-body syndrome. And I learned about this because I was a hypnotherapist for many years, where sometimes what's going on in here, it's played out in the body. For example, and this is just a for instance, let's say somebody um, is in a situation in their life when they consciously they want to move forward and they want to advance, whatever, let's say career, even moving, whatever. And but like everything, people hold back. We don't want to change. We want to do it, but subconsciously we don't. Then you'll have people that if they're really in a tug of war internally, they might have either a leg injury or like what you're describing. All of a sudden they'll get this pain in their leg or both legs, and they're like, "Where did this come from?" Why all of a sudden? And basically, it's like this the back and forth, the tug of war that you have internally about moving forward, not physically,
mhm,
it's played out in your body somehow. Same thing. Um, if you're advancing, if you're reaching to go further, some people will either get an arm injury or their arms or something or their hands, something will start hurting for no reason. Not, like you said, I haven't had an accident or suffered an injury to that part of my body. All right. And it's a mind body syndrome that just, that it's so in there that it manifests in your body. Um, but basically you're telling me that now it's there. It's like not like what's the when people they say oh they have like these pains and it's all in their head because you're telling me now you have a slip disc.
yeah, yeah. And recently, just about a little over a month ago, I finally broke down and they put injections in my SI joint,
Mm-hmm.
and which is I guess some fancy cortisone because I've had it in my hips and only
Right.
lasts for 3 months, but now it's been lasting pretty well.
Right.
But
Right.
it's I'd rather not have this issue, but it was one that came suddenly as a
Sure.
result of an experience. So
Right, and that's
I
the thing.
yeah,
Sometimes when you get pains, you work like it hurts, and then a few more months, and it's hurting more, and then by the time it's like, okay, I've been like this, but you got this like basically overnight, for lack of a better word.
yeah, just days after the experience, and I never saw it coming.
Hmm. Wow. That experience that you had of basically being up in the air, like on some type of gurney,
Mhm.
that is, have you ever had a UFO experience? Actually
No,
sighted one?
no, not I've never seen one. I mean, I'm into UFO and ufology, and
Mm-hmm.
I've interviewed a lot of people who've had these experiencers or they've
Right.
written books about them. And while I can't relate with some of their abduction stories or
Sure.
anything like that, this would be the closest thing I think for me. And because while I was floating, it would have been a good 5 or 6 feet in the air. So yeah, I didn't see a ship. I didn't hear anything. All I felt is the cold air,
That is
and I just heard. You know
so
how? Yeah,
that right that you
and
actually
that was it.
felt.
Hmm.
Sometimes when we have dreams, we leave the weather out of it. How's that? You know what I'm saying? Like you said,
Hmm.
it's January, so obviously it's cold outside. But when you're dreaming or something, that doesn't play in. But you're actually feeling like if you were that open. That presents a lot of interesting questions there as to, and there you go into having this experience physically.
Hmm. Yeah, and ever
Wow.
ever since then, not to that magnitude. I pretty much it's been not as active now. Whatever's been going on with me up until, but in this house
Hmm.
has moved on to my wife. She has her own things, and it's yeah,
But
it's
why is it? Let me ask you something.
mhm,
Is she having separate experiences, or are you both seeing the same thing, or how does that work?
separate. It'll happen
Okay.
even when I'm not here. Now, before she met me, she wasn't
Ah.
really into any of this
Okay. Okay. Okay.
up until we moved here 2 years ago.
Hmm.
She always says, "You better tell your friends to stop messing with me." I go, "Why? What did they do?" Um, well, they moved my jewelry around, or I found coins on the ground, like a quarter here or there. And who uses coins now? I use it to for the grocery store. We have a grocery store here. You put a quarter in the shopping cart, it comes
Right.
out.
Aldings. Yeah.
Oh, yeah, but we don't need change. I have a piggy bank that my mom
Right.
gave me a long time ago, full of coins, but there's no reason to have a coin in a particular part of the room
Right.
because the dogs are going to choke on it. They're gonna eat it or
Yes.
something, right?
Right.
So she's had things launched at her face, her head,
She's what?
fingerprints on. Yeah. So this is. I only saw the end of this part as I was sitting on the couch and I could see the kitchen. All of a sudden, I hear like a bang, right? But when I
Okay.
turned around, there's an object that was on the wall and it fell down. So this thing was on top of our refrigerator. It would have no reason to be propelled towards anything.
Right.
She was walking away from the fridge, and whatever it was just jumped from the fridge to the top of the fridge, aimed towards her head. I did not see it fly towards her, but I did see it once I heard it was falling from the wall to the ground. I
Okay.
go, I go, what did you do? Because I didn't do anything. Why?
Okay.
And then it's not the first time. It's we've had a picture that are nailed to our wall,
Okay.
and I was actually doing a post editing for podcasts because those could be a lot of fun. Uh,
Okay.
some days are better than others, right? You know the pain,
Oh, yes.
and I hear this loud thud hit the ground. I'm like, I'm glad it didn't happen while I had an interview because it was very loud. I go out there, what's wrong? He goes, I see a picture frame on the ground on the floor in the hallway. She goes, this thing just came off the wall and tried to hit me in my face. I go, but it's nailed to the wall because I don't
Hmm.
know how, but we haven't put it back up. We just keep it there empty. It's like, remember what that day that happened?
Yeah. Like,
But
do I want to
that
find out if
picture
this thing is
frame,
gonna fly off at me?
yeah. So we just might as well leave it off, right? And
That is
yeah, it's
so interesting.
and then she's seen
I want to say
fingerprints.
it's
Yeah,
almost like a little bit antagonistic towards her is what it sounds like. Whatever it is.
maybe so. And then with on her dresser, sometimes if you don't dust things very well,
Hmm.
things happen.
Yep.
Well, she's seen these like finger marks like across the top of it. So if you get closer, you see the dust is moved and you see smooth, but it's only like three, right? Like that. Because I've looked at them. I go, hmm. She goes, did you go look through my stuff? I go, no, you have nothing out. We don't even have the same style jewelry. So why would I, she goes, well, look at this. I go, oh, yeah. Okay. And I looked compared to mine, and hers are different sizes, too big for her and too small to
Hmm.
be mine. So I don't
Right.
know. Yeah.
Wow, that begs the question, how
Mhm.
old is that property that you're on or the house? Is it more
Oh,
modern?
it's this neighborhood started in '90. It used to be an old apple orchard owned by a farmer years ago, and
Okay.
whatever family inherited the land became very, very rich because they sold it. and
Right,
there's
and
not
they
one.
developed it.
Yeah, and
And it was
there's not
sold to
one.
developers, I imagine.
Yep, and there's not one apple tree in sight. And which now down the road,
Hmm.
they're building more. Some of these farms are half gone because they're building more.
Yeah, yeah,
So
yeah. Forget it.
which is going to really make angry whoever used to be the inhabitants of these lands.
I
Because it's
mean, I,
not usually, it's not the house, it's usually the land
well,
that's haunted.
have you ever heard of what happened out? Well, it's called Black Hope, but this was out in Texas, and this happened like in the 80s. Have you ever heard of that story? What happened with that?
No.
Okay. This is a place, same thing. Big tract of land, developer buys it, decides they're going to build some houses, but nice houses, like customized directly, not like a development per se, like, but you bought the piece of land with your house, nice. The guy, the developer builds this, bunch of people move in. Story, the ones that ended up writing the story was one family, but all the families that moved into that area that had houses built all eventually had an experience. Okay, everything is fine. There's a couple, they're a little not older. I mean, they have an adult daughter, everything. And then one time they decide this is apparently the triggering point. They decide they're going to put a backyard pool, like where you get with the bulldozer.
Yeah.
Somehow, they in one of they're saying that somebody told them, "Hey, you're going to dig up a coffin if you do that," and they didn't pay attention to it. Sure enough, when they're excavating, they bring up two coffins. All right, this is what triggered a bunch of events that the hauntings. I mean, full scale. I'm not going to go into it. Come to find out, what had happened was this was many years ago. Prior to this, they had a black settlement there called New Hope or Black Hope, okay, and they had made like an unofficial cemetery, buried the people there from the little town. But what happened is one day the little town, it catches fire, burns the town down, and everybody, all the citizens leave. But everybody in the black community knew that that settlement had been there and that cemetery was there. But what happened was back then they would just put up wooden crosses, which of course deteriorate.
Hmm.
Like I said, I'm doing the condensed version. The owners of these places even turned around and tried to, after they had their daughter even died, and then that's a whole nother story. They tried and turned around and tried to sue the developer. Come to find out, the developer, this was never registered. This was like an unofficial town and an unofficial cemetery. So nobody ever went down to the county and said, hey, we have a cemetery here in this location, part of this community. So the developer didn't, it wasn't like, the poltergeist story where you didn't move the bodies. No, they really
Yeah.
didn't know about it because there was nothing in the county's registry to indicate that they had used it as a cemetery. Bottom line, the eventually, I want to say everybody had to move out. That event of when they dug up, it just spread, and the different neighbors had different events. But mostly, what you learn about is the people that did write the book. That everybody just had to move. They left. They had to leave. They couldn't stay there. That's how bad the paranormal phenomenon was. If you ever have a chance, look at it. It's called Black Hope, and it was in Texas. I want to say 80s, mid 80s, late 80s, kind of. But and my point being, what we were talking about, that you're saying here, you this where you're living is out in an apple orchard. Sometimes people are not aware of what's gone on in the land. Yeah, you might know. Well, it's oh, and by the way, one time there's a tree and it's somebody had carved like an arrow to it. And they were just thinking it was something else. Apparently, what they were doing is that when they buried people, they were like getting some of these old oaks that were still there and, like engraving into the tree, like it's basically as a marker,
Hmm.
but people didn't know how to interpret it. Like it's actually marking the site of a burial, that kind of deal. But again, and by this, I'm not saying that you live in a cemetery, but sometimes people just don't realize what's gone on in pieces of land.
Yeah. I mean, you don't know. I mean,
No.
this place could be littered with bodies you never know, past civilizations,
Yeah, sure.
eons ago. And you kind of read my mind. You gave me the poltergeist vibes. I was thinking the scene when the skeletons came up. I think it was in part
Yeah,
two. I was like,
yeah.
oh no, no, don't build a pool. Don't do it.
Well, right. Well, in Poltergeist, it was, you remember that the whole thing was, this is like predates the Poltergeist thing, and it's, the people, this was a genuine story, and their experience. And one of the time, oh, what was it? They were going back and forth with the county, trying to prove that, hey, this was a cemetery. Like, they're like, hey, we're, and the county said, no, you can't dig it up. It's one of those deals. They start digging anyway because they're trying to provide
Ugh,
proof, like, hey. And at that time, their daughter, which was, I want to say 30 or 33, very a younger woman, all of a sudden, her and the mom were digging in the yard trying to find proof of. She becomes like violently sick, and like within 24 hours, she passed away. I'm giving you again the condensed version, and this was really what basically just drove them away from there. I think they moved temporarily for like a couple of years to Montana or something like that. But yes, it's a very interesting story, and what they call a cautionary tale, um, of when you like, like I said, the triggering thing was when they dug into the ground, what you were saying.
yeah.
Uh,
And,
that's what set everything off. So
and
yes,
and as you were talking about that, I wrote down because I have a note. I always have a notebook next to me. I'm gonna look that up
yes,
right tonight as
yes.
soon as we get out. And no, that sounds like a fascinating story. And I'm pretty sure it's not because we never learn. This is
Hmm.
not the first time this has happened. I'm
Oh
sure.
no, of course not. Of course not. I tell everybody, um, because I do a lot of research when I write, people, it's camping. Let's say when they had the gold rush or camping, or even when they were building things, communities would spring up. And back then, not where everybody had a car. Usually the bigger cities are the ones that had the big cemeteries. Sometimes they would do unofficial cemeteries. For example, one time, I'm gonna say this story real quick. I went out there. This was when in Miami, in this little town called Homestead, which is an agricultural part of Miami-Dade County. All right. I had heard there was one of the first schools, elementaries built out there. And I did research. Now, what happens is when Henry Flagler is putting this railroad to go through Florida into the Keys, he's hiring people. So people from across the United States are coming there as workers. All right. People die, they get killed they have an accident or just get
Mhm.
sick. Now, these people are, I don't want to say they're, but they don't have no family ties. They're not from the community. They just came there to work. Sometimes if they knew, they would contact the family and say, look, your so and so died. Sometimes they didn't know. So what happens is this one doctor who owned a piece of land out there, he says, go ahead, just bury them here. All right. In some cases, they didn't even know who they were. They would just open a hole, put the person that, one of the crew died. There you go. Fast forward a couple of years, they finish the work on this bridge that's, this railroad track and this bridge that's going south through Florida. And all of a sudden, now that it's grown a little bit more, he sells the land. And this is eventually where they built, like around the turn of the century, like I want to say 1915, 1920. They built the elementary school there. And I'm not going to say, I do have a video on it, but I'm not going to say exactly where it's at. But basically, it was built on an unofficial cemetery. And there's been sightings, especially at the corners, because basically the city grew around that. And unless you really go back, you never realize that that's the location of where they were burying people because sometimes, especially in South Florida where there's hot,
Oh yeah,
bodies decompose quick. They're not being embalmed. Okay. So they need to like go in the ground quick. And there you go. Sometimes this is the perfect recipe for a haunting,
yeah, and
or at least creepy vibes at the very least.
at least I can imagine because if not the children's, the staff that worked at that school would, I'm sure, have
Oh yeah.
stories. Yeah,
This you could tell when I went on the grounds. I went out there at night, and you could tell it's a very old school. They've remodeled it through the years, but like everything, and of course, there's this doctor. He's not going to lose out like what you were saying that make money
yeah,
on now that they need a piece of land to put a school on. And I was like, and I'm not going to dig up all these people that in some cases they weren't even put in with sometimes they didn't even have a coffin. They would just put in what they call these winding sheets, and in you go.
Oh my. Yeah.
So anyway, Diego, it has been absolutely wonderful to talk to you. I loved it.
Oh,
You are.
thank you so much. You're the best.
Let me ask you: are you? Well, I know you. You're planning another book, then, right? You're percolating that in your head.
I am, and it might be less supernatural, but it'd be more about cryptids. And
Oh,
been doing a lot
you've
of
got
research with
cryptids out there in
cryptids.
Virginia.
We do with Virginia, West Virginia, there,
Yes,
Maryland, and there's so many, but there's a lot of them that have been long and forgotten. So I've been really digging deep into finding some of these things. It's amazing.
yes.
I haven't committed to it yet. I've written maybe, oh my
Well,
gosh,
it's really funny because some
uh,
cryptids were seen for like a little while and they would disappear, and then that begs the question: are some of these things coming in through a portal? And then the portal that's why they're seen for only like X amount of time, and then that's it, no more sightings. And then you got the cryptids. Well, obviously like Bigfoot, like Dogman, which is the one that scares the what out of me.
yeah.
Um,
But
you got.
they get all the glory. But
Let
there's
me tell
so
you
many
something.
others.
I'm going to mention this real quick. As a, I've never had a cryptid sighting per se, but as a hypnotherapist, I had people contact me who had sightings that were in deep anxiety. They couldn't sleep. These are men, by the way, that were calling me to
Mhm.
help. One guy even told me, "I want you to help me forget what I saw." And I said, "I can't do that. There's no such thing." In other words, he wanted to go back to the person he was before he saw that because it tilted his reality so badly that he wanted me to hypnotize him and take him like we're going to erase that part. And there was I had a few people um that I worked with hypnosis because it caused them such a deep level of anxiety to have witnessed something that just
No,
didn't square it with them. It just and by the way, this is what I mean. One thing is when you think, oh, there's a possibility of maybe a cryptid or Bigfoot or whatever, and then there's the part where you actually see it or think you see it, whatever. This is your brain is computing as in this is real, and I'm telling you, it does something to your existence that just knocks it on its butt. So yeah.
yeah, and it's one of the, they always say it's a bear. It's not always a bear. You
No,
don't know what bears look like,
no,
but
no, it's
no,
not.
no. Is in fact that's what I was going to call my book. It's not a bear. But then it's like, no, let me not make people mad. I'll come up with a better title. But it's only 20 pages in. I'm still mulling it over because I got so much stuff to do. Do like yourself, booking the guests, doing the
Yes.
artwork,
Oh yeah.
producing, editing. Because as I didn't love myself enough or hate myself, I did a second podcast as well with
Okay.
Bonus Overdrive Wednesday, and that one
What
is
is that about? What is that podcast about?
it's not even remotely paranormal, but it's anything. You could be a band, you
Okay.
could be a authors, and you could write a horror filmmakers as actors, but
Okay.
nothing really. Sometimes paranormal kind of creeps in, but
It's more like a
it,
freestyle type of
it's
podcast.
a variety, freestyle variety. Because sometimes you got to step back. Because sometimes I suffer from like a little paranormal burnout.
Mm-hmm.
Because a
Yes,
lot of
I
these
know.
things they can get very emotional and very energy draining. You kind of need a break
Yes.
and lift
Yes.
your spirits up a little bit.
Yep. Yes. Most absolutely. Yeah. Let me tell you something. I call everybody the hardcore paranormal investigators. I've and this is a part. This is I know what you're talking about. You're talking about mental, but people that do this really the there's times that I tell them if you ever were engaged in this work for a while, because I do a lot of consulting with other people around the country. Back, as far as the paranormal investigations, the real stuff, not where you got to withdraw because it kind of affects it bleeds over into your real life. How's that?
Yeah,
But I understand what you're saying that you get that you it's like I want to talk about something that's not good, you know, or
yeah,
weird
yeah.
stuff.
Give me something happy.
Yeah,
I'm
exactly.
sorry. Yeah, but yeah,
Absolutely.
that's
Yes.
on bi-weekly. I'm thinking about going weekly on that one, and those are usually on Sundays, and then Let's Find Out comes out every. I'm sorry, Bonus Overdrive Wednesdays on Wednesdays. Let's Find Out comes out on every Sunday. The usual Spotify, YouTube, Rumble,
Let me
and
ask you
most of the
something.
other
If how they
platforms.
can for the
Mhm.
podcast listeners, how can they find you, Diego? As far
Oh
as
no, yeah, thank you for asking that. So I'm on the most. I'm on X as
mm-hmm.
You can find me as Diego the Podcaster or Podcaster Diego. I changed my handle recently on Facebook, Diego the Podcaster, Instagram, Diego the Podcaster. So
Mm-hmm.
those are the main three that I use. And
Okay.
stop by, say hi, give a follow, and
Okay.
definitely,
Absolutely.
Spotify, YouTube, Rumble, and you'll find me somewhere.
Yeah, I'll
And then
put a
you'll
link in the credits of the show. But like I said, there's always the people that are listening. That's why I always consider my podcast listeners so that they can follow up. And because you're also on YouTube, right?
I am in that show. I've done one episode so far with video,
Mm-hmm. Okay.
and that was for the Wednesday edition about the North Pond Hermit, which is a whole thing. It's a lot of fun, and I usually do slideshows. I do audio, but I'm going to start
Mm-hmm.
creeping into the video more and more as I get more comfortable.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Absolutely. Again, it has been a pleasure to speak to you. I hope you're going to come
Oh,
back
thank you so
and
much.
you're going to give me, and I'm looking forward to, even before you come out with your other book, because believe me, I understand what you're talking about. Like, there's only so many things that you can do. And we can talk some more paranormal or whatever, you know. It's like if it's interesting, I don't care. I'm game for it.
Thank
So
you, my friend. I would love to be back on.
take care. Till next time.
You too. Till next time.
Bye bye.
Bye.
Bye bye. Oh, he was great. See, when people's, and I always say this because every time that I've spoken to a guest that has had childhood experiences, depends also if it's terrifying or not. Not, usually when you get something like what happened with him, where it was, let's face it, even as a kid, you realize what are a bunch of people doing walking around in my hallway. But then you have the people that have had as a kid, like they see stuff that's really scary. It's not like people walking up and down my hallway like that's weird, but they see sometimes ghosts or shadow people or somebody in their, or just a feeling. Sometimes it's just a feeling of dread that they know even as a child. But overall, kids are very, like he said, open-minded, accepting of these experiences. And I also think partially that's a coping mechanism because as a kid, where are you going to go? It's like, I mean, yeah, you could call your parents and everything, but it's not like an adult that says, well, I guess I'm going to move out of here like yesterday. When you're a child, you are at the mercy of living where your parents live or your parent or whatever. Let's face it, not all parents can up and just like, okay. So yeah, I think that's partially like a coping mechanism. Like I better deal with this the best way I can, which is what it sounds like he did. He just he got to the point where he just stopped closing the door, and that's really interesting because it makes you think they never came into his room because that's another thing. Sometimes you hear these childhood experiences where, let's say, for the first sighting will be, let's say, in the hallway. And then progressively, whatever they're seeing, whether it's one or more than one figure, starts getting closer and closer. Sometimes they'll stop at the threshold of the room, and then eventually they start coming into the room. And then to the foot of the bed, that's got to be the worst, let me tell you. Wake up and see someone be like, ah, man, I'd scream bloody murder, like, you know. But, but no. And one time I did an investigation where they're having some paranormal activity, and it's a long story, but they had one of the children. There was one girl left that she was 10 or 11. She had like a corner bedroom, and whatever was going on in the rest of the house would not go into her bedroom. Sometimes she could feel something at the door, but and then I remember I asked the mom, I said, did anybody ever do anything or something? She goes, well, I believe she had a friend from work kind of do like a blessing or something like a binding, a sealing, okay, with holy water, some other stuff at the entrance to the girl's bedroom. And it was working. They were having phenomena in the rest of the house, but nothing inside this kid's bedroom. The girl, the girl would sometimes see things outside of her bedroom, but nothing, whatever it was, would always stop at the threshold of her bedroom door, of the bedroom, right? So sometimes, and I mean that was an intense investigation. There was a lot of things that were going on there, and again, sometimes that experience that he had with the sleep paralysis. A lot of people will tell you they'll have the sleep paralysis, but if they can move one little thing, a toe, a finger, anything, any movement will break it, and then they can move. In other words, like your brain is totally awake, but your body's like, I'm not moving. And once you could move any little thing, like in other words, you'll hear people describe where they're like trying with all their might to move my finger, because once they can do that, then it breaks them out of that feeling. And then sometimes when they're having some type of visual, like what he was seeing, but if let me tell you, and that thing that basically he's having these experiences prior to having some type of negative physical manifestation. All right. And it's like, what is that about? That's very interesting. That's very, very interesting. And again, that thing that he's being told, he has this black tornado, whatever that was. And then months later, he's having asthma, asthma attacks, as somebody that's an athlete, and or was it panic attacks, which I know sometimes that mimics, I'm not going to say asthma is a different, but that inability to catch your breath like that. And again, and you know what? That's why I asked him, like, and I know he kind of like was very generalized about what was going on in his life, but I say it all the time, a lot of people think that, oh, you hear about people going places and then something, when I say, being at certain places, and everybody thinks, oh, you have to be actively engaged. I'm going to give you this for instance. I'm not saying this is what happened with you. This is an example. Let's say some people decide they're going to do some occult stuff, Ouija board, some weird shit, whatever. And you've got the main players, the people that are into it, and there's always the friends that are hanging out. And they're in the background watching what's going on. And then, oh, what a bunch of. Everybody thinks that the only ones that can get affected negatively usually are the people that are participating in what that activity is or that event. And that if you're standing in the back there somewhere by the wall watching what's going on, it's like, I'm safe. I'm like way back here. And I'm just seeing what these dumbasses are doing, right? I'm just watching. I'm sorry, that doesn't spare you. I've had people that somehow, when you get that, let's call it negativity, let's be real broad with it. For some reason, it targets certain people for whatever reason. Sometimes physically their health is down. If they're under a lot of stress, emotional or or physical, more than normal. Again, stress is a normal part of life. It's a something that's beyond. It almost knows that your aura's weak. You're like the weak link. So, yeah, you know what? Maybe these people that are participating in, let's say, the Ouija board, whatever they're doing, or I don't know. They since they knew that what they were going to do, maybe they geared up, they prayed, or they did something to themselves. But that guy standing way back there in the corner, that's my target. If you summon something, or you call it forward because you're trying to communicate with it, or whatever it is that you're doing, even including in cemeteries, whatever. Or, and I've said this before, sometimes things walk with people that surround you that you have no idea what it is. And, it's almost like, for lack of a better word, almost parasitic, where it will jump ship. If for some reason it could target, that's what I'm saying. That's why I asked, I said, what were you doing? Who were you with? Where were you? Because sometimes some of these things will on you. And if you're stressed out or something's going, and this goes without saying, if you're doing drug use, hello, forget it. You're putting a big bullseye like right here. Um, when I mean, same thing, alcohol is a drug, whatever, or something that that spiritual turbulence you're going on, it's like you're opening yourself up for a lot of things. And sometimes it goes away by itself because the person kind of like feels I need to like, how can I say, strengthen myself. And sometimes no. Sometimes people endure severe repercussions physically, spiritually from what happens. And most of the time, I'll be honest with you, they really don't understand the source unless you ask them, what were you doing at that time? Who are you with? What did you do? And then they'll go, well, which you kind of generalize. So maybe that was a source. Maybe it wasn't. Maybe it was something totally different. Um, it could have been many, many things. But here he is. Fast forward, and he looks like he's doing great, you know. And so, like I said, I'm going to put links to the in the credits of the show so that you could visit him and check out his podcast. And he's got the video version on YouTube. But again, um, and that thing about the ABBA song, oh, that's right. And I guess because people would say, well, Marlene, that's what's scary about an ABBA song. Come on. But again, it's like, think about it. Here's this house that looks like it's abandoned, or at least nobody's living here. But the certain time of day, they play the ABBA song really loud for an hour, okay? Which is pretty weird. Let's face it, like very weird. Fast forward hundreds of miles away, you hear at night after everybody's asleep this which by the way begs the question. And I'm listening to him because here you're living in this area where obviously everybody's asleep. So you would think, hey, if somebody's out there cranking it up, everybody in the household would have woken up. Even neighbors might have woken up, and you just see everybody like, where's that music coming from? So obviously he's the only one that's hearing this. And you know what? I gotta go look at the lyrics of that song and check out what it says. Maybe there was a message, let's get convoluted, shall we? Maybe there's a message embedded in the lyrics of that song that they were trying to like. Very interesting. So anyway, guys, yeah, I hear my guineas calling out there. It's already dark, and I can hear them squawking. And some of them sometimes do that for no reason. But I'm always thinking something's out there, and I gotta go check them out and see what's going on because you know they've. Let me tell you something. By the way, all my neighbors, because this is very rural out here, everybody knows about my guineas, and everybody asks me, "Are they okay? Okay?" Because I heard them last night making noise, and I was like, "Yeah, they're okay. They're okay. God knows. They're." It's like they're fine. But yes. So guys, till next time, don't forget, sign up for my newsletter on Substack, mppellicer.com, miamighostchronicles.com. And again, you can go to the website and you're going to find links to all the videos and podcast versions of Stories of the Supernatural, Supernatural Storytime, uh, Nightshade Diary, also Eerie News, which are the articles, well, basically what I'm doing is Eerie News, I read not only my own articles, but I look at interesting articles from that are coming out through the paranormal and mostly stuff that's not really sensationalized, but sometimes I come across these articles and it's like bar is haunted in UK, and it's like, oh yeah, it's like real. It's like, okay, this is like beyond. This is not a good article. I usually like more interesting articles that go in a little bit more in depth as far as under the umbrella of the paranormal. So I read those. So again, if you go to miamighostchronicles.com, you're going to find links to all of that stuff in there. I just released like maybe a couple of weeks ago, the one for Mardi Gras 2025. And let's see what's happening in the next few weeks. Plus, I've got a lot of great guests coming on. I've got good guests. As a matter of fact, right now, I'm about to close out season 16 of Stories of the Supernatural. I'm going to Stories of the Supernatural season 17. Okay. So, of course, anybody, if you're an author, if you're a paranormal researcher, or if you're one of these people that's just, like I say, witness yet explain, contact me and come on the show and I'll interview you. All right. We'll chit chat about the paranormal, whatever, weird stuff, cryptids, just whatever. It'll be a good conversation. So, till next time, thank you again for spending this time with me, and you are all wonderful. Take care.